A humble farmer gave $25 to a hungry boy. 25 years later, a millionaire knocked on his door. Springfield was the kind of town where life moved at its own pace. The soil was stubborn and dry, matching the spirit of the folks who lived there. The cracked, dusty earth stretched out endlessly, interrupted occasionally by patches of struggling greenery, fighting to survive under the harsh sun. I spent my entire life here, farming every day from sunrise until sunset. I wasn't wealthy by any stretch, but I took pride in what little we owned. A simple home, a modest piece of land, and most importantly, my family. My wife, Susan, always wore a smile, no matter how exhausting the day had been. And Emily, our only child, was our greatest joy. Her laughter brightened even the toughest, hottest days. Times were challenging, but having each other was enough. One blazing hot afternoon, while working the fields, I noticed something unusual off in the distance. A young boy, maybe 12 or 13 years old, was crouched under an old, dying oak at the edge of our property. I paused, wiping sweat from my forehead. The boy appeared to be desperately picking at the empty branches, searching for anything edible. His clothes were ragged, his face covered in dirt. My heart sank. I approached him slowly, careful not to frighten him. As I got closer, I saw how painfully thin he was, his ribs nearly visible through his torn shirt. "You all right there, young man?" I asked softly, my voice filled with concern. Startled, the boy looked up at me, his big brown eyes showing a mixture of fear and hunger. He didn't answer, just shook his head while clutching a handful of brittle leaves. "Come on," I said gently, "let's get you inside and get something in your stomach." He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he could trust me. But as I turned and headed toward the house, he quietly followed, his bare feet kicking up dust as he walked. Inside, Susan was preparing bread dough when we entered. She didn't ask any questions, just gave me an understanding nod and set another place at the table. She served the boy a generous bowl of soup, which he ate ravenously, as if it was his first meal in days. Watching him, my heart grew heavier, wondering where he'd come from and what had brought him to this desperate state. After the boy finished eating, I leaned forward on the table. "What's your name, son?" "Joshua," he muttered, chewing hungrily on a piece of bread. "Where are your parents, Joshua?" He lowered his eyes, speaking softly, "I don't have any." Susan and I exchanged a glance, both of us feeling the ache of the boy's loneliness. No child should face the world alone. Standing up, I reached into my back pocket, pulling out a crumpled wad of cash. $25 I'd been saving to buy seed for next season. I placed it on the table in front of him. "Take this," I said firmly but gently. "It ain't much, but it'll help you get into town. Maybe you'll find someone there who can give you a hand." Joshua stared at the money, eyes wide with disbelief. He shook his head slightly. "I can't take that," he whispered. I nodded firmly. "You can and you will. You need it more than I do right now. Just promise me you'll use it for something good." His lip quivered as he reached for the money, his hands shaking. Tears filled his eyes as he looked up at me. "I promise, sir. Someday I'll pay you back. I swear I'll come back and repay your kindness." I smiled warmly and patted his shoulder. "Don't you worry about repaying me, Joshua. Just look after yourself." Joshua stood, clutching the money tightly. He didn't say much else, just a quiet, "Thank you," before heading out the door and disappearing down the dusty road. I watched him go, feeling a mixture of hope and sorrow. I'd done all I could, but the world was harsh for a kid like Joshua. Still, something in his eyes told me maybe he'd be all right. That evening, as Susan and I sat by the fireplace, she looked at me softly. "Do you think we'll ever see him again?" I shrugged, gazing into the flames. "Maybe not, but I know we did the right thing. The world needs more kindness, Susan. If he's gonna make it, he'll need every bit of kindness he can get." Susan smiled gently, resting her head on my shoulder. "You're a good man. We need more folks like you." I didn't reply, just held her tight, letting the warmth of the fire comfort us as the cool night settled in. The land might be rough and life tougher still, but tonight, at least for a moment, we felt hopeful. Days in Springfield continued as always, slow and steady under the endless cycle of sunrises and sunsets. Life moved forward, and the memory of Joshua began to fade. Yet, the quiet gratitude in his voice and his promise to return someday lingered in my thoughts. I never expected anything to come of it. Life had taught me better. Still, his sincerity had touched something deep inside me. Weeks turned into months, months into years. I kept working hard, making the most out of the stubborn earth. I didn't regret giving Joshua the money. It felt more like planting a seed of hope that might someday bloom. I didn't know where he'd gone or what had become of him, but I held on to the belief that he was out there somewhere, making a life for himself. Susan carried on tirelessly, never complaining, even though I knew times were tough for her. Raising Emily brought new challenges: school fees, supplies, and constant worries about the future. Yet Susan faced them quietly, with the strength that Springfield folks were known for. Emily remained the bright spot in our lives, her laughter echoing joy through our modest home. She inherited her mother's smile and my determination. From an early age, she helped on the farm, easing our burdens. But as she grew, it became clear her dreams went far beyond the farm. "I want to be a teacher," she told me one evening, eyes bright with excitement. "I want to help kids the way you helped Joshua." John had smiled at that, feeling a sense of pride swelling in my chest. I knew we didn't have the funds to send Emily off to college, but seeing how her eyes lit up when she talked about it, I just couldn't bring myself to discourage her. Instead, I encouraged her dreams, telling her to work hard and never lose focus. Maybe I thought things would somehow come together. Not long after Emily shared her aspirations, her health began to decline. At first, we barely noticed, just small things like fatigue and occasional coughing, but it wasn't long before these symptoms worsened considerably. The local doctors couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong, but they all agreed she needed serious medical care, which wasn't going to come cheaply. Susan and I were heartbroken. It felt as if our fragile world was falling apart around us. Our small savings wouldn't be nearly enough to cover Emily's treatment, and without that money, the future looked bleak. For the first time in my life, I felt truly helpless. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, weighed down by the gravity of our situation, Emily looked up at me with determination. "We'll get through this, Dad. We always do." I forced a small smile, but my eyes surely showed my doubts. "I'm not so sure this time, Emily, but we'll keep fighting." Truthfully, I had no idea what to do next. I'd always managed to provide for my family, even if it meant going without myself, but this was beyond my capabilities. I didn't know where to turn or how to fix things. Then one day, while working out in the fields, I saw a cloud of dust rising in the distance. Squinting against the harsh sunlight, I watched as a large vehicle came closer. It was rare for anyone to drive out this far, let alone in such a fancy car. As it approached, I saw it clearly, a shiny black SUV, the type of car only someone wealthy would own. My heart started pounding when the vehicle stopped in front of our house. A sharply dressed man stepped out, his polished shoes shining in the sun. He seemed oddly familiar, the way he walked and carried himself. "Mr. John?" he called out confidently. "That's me," I replied, unsure of what to expect. The man smiled warmly, and at that moment, recognition hit me like lightning. It was Joshua, the hungry boy I'd helped so many years ago, standing before me now as a successful, confident man. "Joshua?" I said, scarcely believing my eyes. He nodded, his grin broadening. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" I was speechless. I had always wondered about that boy, but never in my wildest imagination had I thought he'd turn up like this. Joshua stepped closer, offering his hand. "I made a promise to you 25 years ago, and am here to keep it." We shook hands, my mind still spinning. "What do you mean?" I asked softly. Joshua's eyes softened, carrying the same sincerity from our first meeting. "You saved my life back then, Mr. John. Now it's my turn to help you." I stared at him, overwhelmed by the transformation. This wasn't the frail, desperate kid who once wandered onto my farm. He was a confident, prosperous man. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Memories flooded the silence. The small act of kindness under the burning sun, the promise Joshua had made, and the many years I'd spent wondering what had become of him. Finally, my voice barely a whisper, I said, "I can't believe it's really you." Joshua chuckled softly, easing the tension. "I never forgot your kindness, Mr. John. Not even for a moment. I owe you everything." I shook my head gently. "You owe me nothing. Any decent person would have done the same." His expression grew serious. "Not everyone would have done what you did. You and your family gave me a chance when nobody else would. I've carried that kindness with me all these years." Sitting on our old porch chairs, Joshua looked around, smiling nostalgically. The house had aged, weathered by time, but it still held its charm. As we settled in, I said with pride and surprise, "You've done well for yourself, Joshua. Life has treated you kindly." He nodded, leaning back thoughtfully. "I've been lucky, more than I ever thought possible." His gaze drifted toward the fields. "That $25 you gave me, it was everything. It bought me a bus ticket to the city, where I had no plan, just determination." I listened intently as Joshua shared his journey after leaving Springfield. Had arrived with nothing but determination and the clothes he wore. Initially, he struggled, taking odd jobs and sleeping in shelters. Slowly, though, he found mentors who believed in him, helping him pursue education and eventually start a successful business. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you," he said earnestly. "Every step of the way I've thought of your kindness. I've worked hard for 25 years, always keeping you and your family in mind." My throat tightened. I'd often wondered about Joshua's fate, but never expected this reunion. "We're proud of you," I said softly. "You've accomplished amazing things." Joshua smiled gently, yet behind his eyes lingered a hint of sadness. "I know things haven't been easy for you either, Mr. John," Joshua said softly. "That's why I'm here, to repay the kindness you once showed me." I opened my mouth to object, but Joshua raised a gentle hand, stopping me. "I understand your pride, and I respect it, but this isn't charity, this is me keeping my word. Please, let me help." Before I could reply, the front door creaked open, and Susan stepped onto the porch, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw Joshua. "Susan," I said, standing to introduce him, "you remember Joshua, don't you?" Recognition flashed across her face as she rushed over, pulling Joshua into a warm embrace. "Oh, my goodness. Look at you. Grown and successful." She stepped back to take a better look. "We've wondered so often how you were." Joshua grinned, clearly touched by her warmth. "It's wonderful to see you, Mrs. Susan. You've both been on my mind constantly." We all sat down, and Joshua continued sharing his remarkable journey. Susan and I listened, captivated by the hardships, determination, and successes Head experienced. It was clear Head never forgotten the kindness shown to him all those years ago. As the sun began setting, painting the sky shades of orange and pink, Joshua turned serious again. He looked directly at me. "I know it's been difficult for you lately," he said softly. "I heard about Emily's health." My heart tightened painfully. Emily's illness consumed our thoughts daily, casting a shadow over everything. "She's not well," I admitted quietly. "We've been trying, but we can't afford the treatment." Joshua's jaw set with determination. "That's exactly why I'm here. Let me help. You'll pay for whatever she needs. Doctors, hospitals, anything. I promise she'll get the best possible care." I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. It was too generous, almost overwhelming. "I can't let you do that," I protested weakly. "It's too much." Joshua leaned forward earnestly. "Mr. John, you once saved my life. Please let me help save hers." His words hung heavily in the quiet evening air, and I felt conflicted. Accepting help wasn't easy. I'd always taken pride in providing for my family without depending on others. Susan placed her hand gently on my arm, sensing my struggle. "John," she said softly, "maybe this is exactly what we need. Perhaps it's all right to accept help. Just this once." I glanced at Susan, seeing the practicality in her eyes. She was right, as usual, but my pride still battled my gratitude. I thought of Emily, of her tired eyes and how bravely she fought each day. Without help, we might lose her. Joshua seemed to sense my hesitation. I understand how difficult this is, he said kindly. But this isn't just about us. It's about Emily. She deserves a chance at life. Please, let me provide that. Closing my eyes briefly, I finally nodded. When I opened them, I met Joshua's determined gaze and felt hope for the first time in months. All right, I whispered. If it means getting Emily the care she needs, well, accept your help. Relief flooded Joshua's face. Thank you, Mr. John. I promise you won't regret it. I've already arranged for the best specialists in the city. Emily will receive the best treatment available. Susan squeezed my arm gently, exhaling deeply. We're truly grateful, Joshua. More than words can say. Joshua smiled warmly, tension easing from his shoulders. You don't need to thank me. I'm simply repaying your kindness. As we discussed details, a sense of calm settled over me. For the first time in ages, genuine hope filled our hearts. Perhaps Emily really had a chance. The heavy burden I'd been carrying felt lighter, replaced by a cautious optimism that maybe everything would indeed turn out all right. The next morning, I sat quietly at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and watching the sun rise slowly over the fields. These quiet mornings had always been my favorite, a peaceful time before the day's demands began. Today, though, felt different. Nervous excitement mixed with lingering anxiety filled me. Susan entered the kitchen softly, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. You're up early, she said gently. I nodded, sighing deeply. Couldn't sleep, too much on my mind. She smiled, pulling up a chair beside me, ready to face whatever lay ahead together. Everything's going to be okay, Susan said gently, placing her hand over mine. Joshua's here now. We are not facing this alone anymore. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the warmth settle into my bones. I know, I said, still trying to wrap my head around it all. It's just, after all these years, he came back. And not just to say thank you. He's really doing something. He's going to help Emily. It's more than I ever imagined. Susan smiled softly. Sometimes life surprises you. You did a good thing for that boy, John. Now that kindness is finding its way back to us. I nodded slowly, pride and gratitude swelling in my chest. I had never helped Joshua for praise or payback. I did it because it felt right. And now, after all this time, that single act of kindness was circling back to us in a way I never could have foreseen. Later that day, Joshua returned, his plan already set in motion. He had arranged for a specialist in the city to see Emily. Everything had been taken care of, transportation, medical expenses, every last detail. I'll handle everything, Joshua reassured us. You just focus on getting Emily ready. We'll leave tomorrow. Susan and I looked at each other, hearts weighed down with a blend of hope and nerves. Leaving Springfield, even briefly, was intimidating. But this was for Emily. We had to find the strength for her. As the evening settled in, Emily sat by the window, staring out over the fields. She did not yet know everything Joshua had done. Her illness had taken so much, her strength, her spirit. But there was still that inner fire. She had always been strong, and I prayed she had enough left in her to face this fight. I walked over and laid a hand on her shoulder. We're getting you help, Emily. The best doctors we can find. Joshua's making sure of it. She looked up, her eyes tired but shining with gratitude. I don't even know what to say, Dad. You don't have to say a word, I said, my voice catching. Just focus on getting better. The next morning carried with it a determined silence. There was no chaos, only a shared focus. Joshua had sent a car to bring us to the city. As the sun rose over the fields of Springfield, we knew this day marked a turning point. Susan and I packed lightly, just the essentials. Emily, though clearly exhausted, did her best to move around and help. Susan gently guided her back to her chair. You let us handle this, sweetheart. You need to rest. Emily gave a faint smile, trying to hold back the guilt she felt. She hated being a burden. She had always been independent. This illness had robbed her of so much: her energy, her freedom, even her hope. But Joshua's return had lit a new spark inside her. Joshua arrived just as we were finishing up. He looked calm and composed, the kind of calm that settled everyone else around him. His smile was warm, but when he turned to Emily, there was real concern in his eyes. "You ready for this?" he asked gently. Emily met his gaze. "As ready as I'll ever be." The ride to the city was quiet, the soft hum of the engine the only sound. I sat up front beside Joshua, watching the fields roll past. My mind was racing. Just a few days ago, I had been preparing for the worst. Now, thanks to Joshua, we had a real shot at turning this around. Susan sat in the back with Emily, her hand resting gently on our daughter's knee. Hope was in her eyes, but I knew she feared the possibility of disappointment. We had been through so much already, but watching Joshua confidently navigate the city traffic, she allowed herself to believe, just a little, that maybe things really were changing. The city rose up before us. Tall buildings, endless traffic, a world so different from our quiet life back home. Emily hadn't left Springfield in years, and the sights overwhelmed her. The energy buzzed around us, both exciting and intimidating. "We're almost there," Joshua said, checking the rearview mirror. "The hospital is just ahead. I spoke to the doctors this morning. They're ready for us." Emily's stomach fluttered with nerves. She was stepping into a whole new world. Machines, tests, specialists, treatments. It was scary, but she had to hold on to the hope that this was the beginning of something better. When we arrived, Joshua parked the car and helped Emily out, his hand steady and reassuring. The hospital was massive, bustling with people, and filled with the smell of antiseptic. Emily's legs shook beneath her, but Joshua was right beside her, a steadying presence. A team of doctors and nurses greeted us at the entrance. They seemed to know Joshua well. Everything had been arranged. We were ushered through the process quickly and with care. Emily was taken for preliminary tests, and while she was away, Susan and I sat in the waiting room with Joshua. Susan wiped away a tear, her voice trembling. "This is more than we ever dreamed. I don't know how we'll ever repay you, Joshua." He shook his head. "You owe me nothing. This is the least I can do. You helped me when I had nothing. Now I have the chance to return that." I finally found my voice. "It's just hard to believe. We've been through so much." I didn't think there was any hope left for Emily. Joshua leaned in, his face serious. "There's always hope, Mr. John. You taught me that a long time ago. When I had no one and nowhere to go, you gave me hope. Now it's my turn to give that back." I met Joshua's gaze, and in that quiet exchange, I understood something deeper. This was never just about money or medical bills. Joshua hadn't come back because he felt he had to. He came back because he cared truly, deeply. The kindness I had shown him all those years ago had created something more than a memory. It had created a bond. Hours dragged by as Emily went through test after test. Susan and I sat together in tense silence, our hands clutched tightly. Joshua remained quiet, his calm demeanor never wavering. But I could tell, he was as invested in Emily's recovery as we were. At last, a doctor approached. His expression was neutral but not grim. I stood quickly, my heart hammering in my chest. "How is she, doctor?" He offered a reassuring smile. "She's stable. The initial tests are complete, and though we need to run a few more, I'm optimistic. We're starting treatment right away." Susan exhaled a shaky breath, one she hadn't even noticed she was holding. I felt the weight on my shoulders lighten just a little. We were not in the clear, but it was a beginning. "Thank you," I said, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for taking care of her. She's in good hands," the doctor said before heading back. We returned to the waiting room, and Joshua leaned toward us. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "But we're in this together. Whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere." I looked at him, overwhelmed by the gratitude rising inside me. For once, hope didn't feel like some far-off dream. It felt close, felt real. The days that followed were a blur of doctors, treatments, and constant visits. Emily stayed in the hospital, her body slowly but surely responding to the care she was getting. Each day, Susan, Joshua, and I took turns sitting by her bedside. We offered comfort, encouragement, and quiet company. It was a slow journey, but we started to see signs, tiny things, that showed she was getting stronger. Emily herself began to feel it. Even though she was still weak, she had more good days than bad. The support from all of us, especially Joshua, gave her the strength to keep going. I often caught her looking at him when she thought no one was watching, her expression full of gratitude, and something else I couldn't quite place. "I feel a little better today," she'd whisper on days she had the strength. "That's great," I'd reply, my heart lifting at the sound of her voice. "Just keep resting. We're all right here with you." Susan would nod and squeeze her hand, while Joshua remained nearby. He rarely spoke much, but he didn't need to. His presence alone said enough. Week after week, Emily's condition improved. Her color returned, her appetite picked up, and the spark in her eyes began to flicker back to life. The doctors stayed cautious, reminding us that full recovery would take time, but they were hopeful. Throughout it all, Joshua was there, every day by her side. He brought books, shared stories, and held her hand during painful treatments. He was steady and constant, and his quiet strength helped her through the hardest parts. One afternoon, as she lay resting, Joshua sat beside her flipping through a book he'd brought. The room was quiet except for the beeping of machines. Emily turned her head and looked at him. "You don't have to stay, you know," she said softly. "You've done more than enough." Joshua looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "I want to be here," he said simply. "You don't have to go through this by yourself." Emily smiled faintly, clearly moved. She had never known someone quite like him, someone who gave without asking for anything in return. "You've done so much. I don't know how I'll ever repay you," she said. Joshua shook his head gently. "You don't owe me anything. I'm not doing this for payback. I'm doing it because I want to. You matter to me." Emily's smile lingered, and there was something in his words, something in the way he looked at her, that made her heart flutter. She didn't know if it was the medicine or something else, but there was a warmth inside her she hadn't felt in a long time. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just get better. That's all I want." She closed her eyes, exhausted, but comforted by his presence. As she drifted to sleep, she thought of Joshua, his kindness, his strength, and how safe she felt with him around. As Emily continued to recover, something began to shift. What had started as gratitude was becoming something else, something deeper. Joshua's care and devotion had grown into a connection neither of them had expected. He found himself drawn to her not just out of duty or history, but because he genuinely cared for her. That bond, forged years ago between a desperate boy and a kind farmer, had grown into something entirely new. For Susan and me, seeing Emily gain strength day by day was everything we had prayed for. And we couldn't help but notice the quiet way she and Joshua looked at each other, the way they seemed to understand one another without needing words. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Susan and I sat in the hospital cafeteria, sipping lukewarm coffee. It had been a good day. Emily was stronger. She had even laughed. "You've noticed it too, haven't you?" Susan asked, breaking the comfortable silence. I glanced at her, curious. "Noticed what?" "Michael and Emily," Susan said, her tone light but certain. "There's something happening between them." I leaned back in my chair, frowning a little. "You think so?" Susan nodded, her smile soft and knowing. "I've seen how he looks at her, John. He cares. And I think Emily's starting to feel the same way." I let out a long breath and ran a hand through my graying hair. "I don't know. Joshua's been nothing but good to us, no doubt about that. But this is Emily we're talking about. I just don't want to see her get hurt." She reached across the table and gently placed her hand on mine. "I don't think he would hurt her, John. Joshua's a good man. He's been by her side through everything. Maybe, just maybe, this is something good we never expected." I nodded slowly, still feeling protective, but unable to ignore what Susan had said. Joshua had gone above and beyond for our family. I trusted him. I just wasn't ready to let my guard down when it came to my daughter. Still, I knew we'd have to see where things went. I suppose we'll just have to see how it plays out, I said finally, with a mix of caution and hope. Over the next few weeks, Emily continued to heal. The treatments were working, and the doctors were quietly optimistic. With each passing day, she grew stronger, and her spirit rose along with her strength. As her health improved, something else began to stir. Something within her heart. What started as gratitude toward Joshua slowly began to evolve into something more. Emily noticed it in the way her chest fluttered when he entered the room, the way her thoughts returned to him when he wasn't near. It was a feeling she tried to dismiss at first, unsure of it, but it only grew stronger. One evening, Joshua sat by her bed reading aloud from a book. Emily watched him closely, the way his voice softened with each page, how at ease he seemed beside her. In that moment, something clicked inside her. There was comfort, yes, but also warmth, safety, connection, love maybe. As the days passed, Emily found herself reflecting more and more on her feelings. She had leaned on Joshua for so long now, not just for medical support, but emotionally, too. His steady presence through the worst of her illness had given her more than hope. It had given her a glimpse of something beautiful. Joshua had been her rock, her constant. And now, as her body mended, her heart seemed to be opening in ways she hadn't anticipated. One afternoon, as she sat by the window watching sunlight dance through the branches, Joshua arrived with his familiar gentle smile and a small bouquet of flowers. "You didn't have to bring those," Emily said, though the gesture brought a smile to her face. "I wanted to," he replied, placing them on the bedside table. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," she said truthfully. "Stronger, every day, because of you." "You're doing all the hard work," Joshua said. "I'm just cheering you on." His sincerity stirred something deep in her chest. She noticed how his eyes lingered, how his words seemed to carry more meaning than he let on. As the afternoon sunlight faded and the room dimmed, Joshua continued reading to her. Emily closed her eyes, letting his voice wrap around her like a blanket. But instead of focusing on the story, her thoughts drifted to him. "Joshua," she said softly, cutting through the story. He looked up, his expression instantly attentive. "What is it?" he asked. Emily hesitated, unsure how to say what she was feeling, but she knew she couldn't keep it inside any longer. "I don't know exactly how to say this," she began, voice trembling slightly, "but I've been thinking a lot, about everything, about you." Joshua closed the book gently and set it aside. His full attention was on her now. "You've done so much for me," Emily continued, her heart pounding, "and I've been trying to figure out how to thank you. But the truth is, I don't think what I'm feeling is just gratitude anymore." Joshua leaned forward, his eyes steady and open. "I think I'm starting to feel something more," she said quietly. "Something I wasn't expecting. And I don't know if you feel the same, or if I should even say this, but it's there. I feel it." A silence settled between them. Emily's heart beat hard in her chest, wondering if she'd said too much. Then Joshua reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and grounding. "Emily," he said gently, "you have no idea how much you mean to me." Her breath caught in her throat. "I've tried to keep my feelings in check," he continued, "because the last thing I wanted was to complicate things for you while you were healing. But the truth is, I've felt it too. For a while now. I just didn't know how or when to say it." Emily's eyes filled with emotion, relief, joy, something she hadn't dared to hope for. Their bond, built on kindness, courage, and shared struggle, had quietly transformed into something beautiful. And neither of them had to say another word to know it was real. She had not been imagining it. The connection between them was real, and Joshua felt it just as deeply as she did. "I care about you, Emily," Joshua said, his voice soft and full of meaning. "More than I ever thought possible. I'm not trying to rush anything, but I need you to know, whatever you're feeling, I feel it too." Tears pricked at the corners of Emily's eyes. not from sadness, but from the immense relief that swept over her. She had been so afraid to voice her feelings, unsure of what might happen if she did. But now, hearing Joshua's words, she realized she no longer had to be afraid. "I don't know what comes next," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I do know that I want you to be part of it." Joshua smiled and gently squeezed her hand. "We'll figure it out together." They sat there in the fading light, hands clasped, an unspoken understanding growing stronger with each passing minute. It was no longer just about kindness or gratitude. It was something deeper, something real and full of promise. For the first time in a long while, Emily dared to believe in a future that went beyond recovery. A future that included Joshua. Emily had never been one to easily open her heart. But ever since that quiet confession to Joshua, the world felt a little different. Lighter, more hopeful. The uncertainty that had weighed her down was lifting. Between them now stood a clarity born from all those long, quiet days in the hospital. Still, some things remained unsaid. The following days blurred together in a mix of continued treatment and small steps forward. Emily was gaining strength, strong enough that the doctors began mentioning the possibility of her release. It was the news they had all hoped for, but with it came a new layer of anxiety. What would life look like outside the hospital? What would happen between her and Joshua once she was home? One afternoon, as they sat in her room, the conversation finally turned toward the future. "So," Emily began, her voice light but edged with nerves, "the doctors think I might be going home soon." Joshua looked up from the book in his hands, his face lighting up. "That's wonderful news." She nodded, fingers fiddling with the blanket draped over her lap. "It is. I'm excited, but also nervous." His smile faded slightly. "Nervous about what?" Emily paused, then sighed. "About what happens next. We've been in this bubble. Everything has been about treatment and recovery. Once I go home, everything changes, doesn't it?" Joshua leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Things don't have to change. Not between us." Emily let out a small, unsure laugh. "I know, but it's easy to say that now, here in the hospital. What if it gets complicated?" He reached over, taking her hand gently. "Emily, life is already complicated. But that doesn't mean we give up. I'm not going anywhere, no matter what comes next." She met his eyes, her heart filling with warmth at his words. She wanted to believe him. Deep down, she did. But the fear of the unknown still lingered. "I just don't want to lose what we have," she said softly. "You won't," Joshua assured her. "One day at a time. Whatever happens, I'm here. We'll face it together." Emily smiled, feeling something inside her settle. Joshua had been her strength through so much. Knowing he would still be by her side made all the difference. A few days later, Emily was discharged from the hospital. It was bittersweet. She was thankful to be going home, yet a part of her would miss the familiarity of the hospital, the routine, the people, and the safety net it had provided. But she was not leaving alone. Joshua had insisted on driving her back, ensuring every detail was handled so she would be comfortable. As they drove away from the city, the scenery changed. Skyscrapers gave way to open roads, then to rolling fields and clear skies. Emily gazed out the window, watching the world pass by. "What are you thinking about?" Joshua asked gently, glancing at her from behind the wheel. She turned to him, smiling faintly. "Everything. The strange being out here again. I've been away for so long." Joshua nodded, understanding. "It's a big adjustment. But you've come a long way, Emily. You're stronger than you know." His words meant more than she could express. Still, her thoughts kept drifting to what their lives would look like now, how things might change between them outside the hospital walls. When they finally reached the farm, Susan and I were waiting on the front porch. The moment we saw her, we both rushed down to greet her, our hearts full of joy. Susan wrapped Emily in a long embrace while I stood beside them, my eyes misty with gratitude. Our daughter was home. She was stronger. She was smiling. And she wasn't alone. My eyes welled up as I pulled Emily into a tight hug, and Susan's smile was the brightest I'd seen in months. "You're home?" Susan whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. "You're finally home." Emily nodded, her throat tight with emotion. It felt good to be back, to breathe in the scent of the soil, to see the old porch and the fields stretching into the distance. But when she glanced over at Joshua, standing nearby with a quiet smile, she felt a tug in her heart. Something between them was still unspoken. That evening, after Susan and I had turned in for the night, Emily sat alone on the porch, staring out at the fields cloaked in moonlight. The stars above shimmered like they were welcoming her home. The porch door creaked, and she turned to see Joshua stepping outside, hands in his jacket pockets. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Not at all," she said, motioning to the space beside her. He sat down, and for a while, they sat together in easy silence, gazing at the stars. But the quiet wasn't enough to hold back the thoughts Emily had carried with her since leaving the hospital. "I've been thinking," she said softly, "about us." Joshua turned to her, his expression open and calm. "What about us?" She took a steadying breath. "I meant what I said at the hospital about how I feel. But now that I'm home, I just want to be sure we're on the same page." He reached out and took her hand. "Emily, I've been sure for a long time. I care about you more than I've ever cared about anyone. I don't want to rush anything, but I also don't want to pretend this isn't real." Her heart lifted at his words. All the fears she had carried seemed smaller now. "I don't want to pretend either," she whispered. Joshua smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "Then we won't. We'll take things as they come, together." And right there, beneath the wide, starry sky, Emily felt a quiet peace settle over her. She still did not know what the future held, but she knew that whatever came next, she would not be facing it alone. The days following Emily's return to the farm were filled with a peace she hadn't known in months. With every sunrise, she felt a little stronger. Her recovery was slow, but the burden of illness was slowly being replaced by clarity and hope. Joshua rented a small place nearby, wanting to stay close without overwhelming her. Their time together was a gentle balance. He gave her space, but never left her feeling alone. They spent their days walking through the fields, talking about life, fears, and what might come next. What they were building was real, rooted in more than just circumstance. Emily, cautious at first, felt her heart open a bit more each day. At one point, she feared what they shared in the hospital would not survive in the real world. But Joshua showed her, time and again, that he was in this for the long haul. One evening, as they sat together under the stars once again, Emily reflected on how far she had come. Just months ago, she wasn't sure she'd even survive. Now she was thinking about the future. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice gentle. Joshua looked at her, patient as ever. "About what?" "About everything," she said, gazing out into the fields. "About the farm, about my parents, about us." He shifted slightly, giving her his full attention. "What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath. "For a long time, I was scared to imagine a future. I didn't believe there would be one. But now I can. And I want you to be a part of it." Emotion flickered in his eyes. "I want that too, Emily. I've wanted that for a long time." She smiled. "Everything feels different now. I feel different, stronger, more hopeful. And you've been a big part of that." He laced his fingers through hers. "You've always been strong. I'm just glad I could be here to help." She rested her head against his shoulder. "I still don't know what comes next, but I know I want to face it with you." Joshua wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. "We will," he promised. "One step at a time." In the weeks that followed, as Emily continued to heal, she and Joshua became inseparable. Every day brought them closer. Their bond, built on quiet moments and shared strength, deepened with every laugh, every conversation. Susan and I noticed, and while I kept my cautious distance, watching with a protective eye, Susan couldn't hide her delight. "You know, I think they're good for each other," she said one evening as we sat on the porch, the sun sinking behind the hills. I crossed my arms, eyes following them as they strolled hand in hand across the field. "You think so?" She nodded, her smile gentle. I do. Emily's been through more than most. For a long time, I didn't think we'd ever see her smile again. But look at her now. She's happy. And I think Joshua has a lot to do with that. I didn't answer right away. I just watched them, feeling a cautious hope rise in me. Their silhouettes stood against the fading twilight. I could not deny it. My daughter looked happier and healthier than she had in months. And Joshua? Well, he had proven himself over and over again. He had been there for Emily in ways I could not. And for that, I was truly grateful. I suppose you're right, I said finally, my voice gruff but not unkind. He's been good to her. Susan smiled, patting my knee gently. You'll see, John. This is a good thing. For Emily, each day felt like a new beginning. She had started helping out around the farm again. Small tasks at first, nothing too strenuous, but just enough to feel useful. Her body was still healing, and the fatigue came and went, but she refused to let it stop her. Every step forward felt like a small victory. One afternoon, as she and Joshua strolled through the fields, Emily stopped suddenly and turned to face him. Joshua, she began, her voice serious, there's something I need to say. He stopped and looked at her, his brow furrowed. What is it? She took a deep breath, her heart racing. I don't know if I've said it enough, but I'm so grateful for everything you've done for me. You saved my life in more ways than just medically. You've stood by me every step of the way, and Joshua reached up and gently placed his hand against her cheek, his gaze tender. Emily, you don't have to thank me. I did all of it because I care about you, because I love you. His words hung in the air. For a moment, everything else faded away. Emily stared at him, her heart thudding in her chest, and allowed herself to finally feel everything she had been holding back. I love you too, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Joshua smiled, a quiet, heartfelt smile, and pulled her into his arms. Underneath the wide, open sky of Springfield, Emily felt something settle in her heart. She had found what she did not even know she had been searching for. A future filled with love, hope, and the promise of more. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the rest of the world falling away. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The connection between them only deepened. With their feelings out in the open, it felt like the final piece had clicked into place. Life on the farm settled into a comforting rhythm. Emily's recovery continued. The farm thrived, and that once elusive feeling of joy became a constant in our home. But one thing still lingered. While Emily had fully embraced her relationship with Joshua, and he had proven himself to all of us, I had not quite come to terms with it. I trusted him, but the way he came into our lives, the timing, it all still made me pause. One evening, after a long day in the fields, I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon. The scent of warm earth and grass filled the air. I'd seen this view countless times, but tonight, I couldn't focus on the sky. I was thinking about Emily, about how much she had been through, about how much she had grown. Susan joined me, handing me a mug of coffee. You're quiet tonight, she said, settling into the chair beside me. Just thinking. About Emily and Joshua? She asked knowingly. I sighed deeply. Yeah, I know he's been good to her, better than I could have asked for, but I still worry. I just want to be sure she's going to be all right. Susan laid a hand gently on my arm. I understand, John. You're her father. You'll always worry. But look at her. She's happy. Truly happy. Joshua has been with her through every moment of this journey. I think it's time we trust that. I stared out at the fading light. I do trust him, I admitted. It still feels unreal. After everything we went through, then he showed up out of nowhere and turned our lives around. Feels like I'm going to wake up from all this. She laughed softly. Sometimes life does that. Surprises us. You've said that before yourself. I nodded slowly. She was right, as usual. Emily was the happiest I'd seen her in years. Joshua had shown nothing but devotion. That night, as we finished dinner, I found myself watching them. Joshua and Emily. There was something effortless between them. The way they smiled at each other. The quiet glances. It was real. After dinner, I asked Joshua to step outside with me. We stood on the porch, the cool evening wrapping around us. The farm had gone still. Joshua, I began, my tone even. There's something I need to say. He turned toward me, eyes steady. Of course, Mr. John. What's on your mind? I hesitated, gathering my words. I've seen how close you and Emily have gotten. I know how much you care about her, and she means everything to me. So I have to ask, whatever this is between you two, are you in it for the right reasons? Joshua met my eyes, his expression calm and unwavering. Mr. John, I understand your concerns, Joshua said, his tone earnest. And I want you to know that my feelings for Emily aren't something I take lightly. I love her. I've loved her for a while now, and I want to build a future with her. This isn't about paying back a debt. It's real. I nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. There was something about the way Joshua spoke. Honest, heartfelt, that quieted the last lingering doubts in my mind. The boy I once helped had grown into a man who not only cared for my daughter but wanted to be part of our lives for good. I believe you, I said, my voice steady. And I want you to know that I'm thankful for everything. You've given Emily a second chance at life, and for that, I'll always be grateful. But more than that, you've become part of this family. Joshua's expression softened, clearly moved. Thank you, Mr. John. That means more than you know. I reached out, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. Just take care of her. That's all I ask. I will, he promised. You have my word. With that, something shifted. A peace I hadn't felt in years settled over me. I had spent so long worrying about Emily's future, but standing there beside Joshua, I knew things had changed. My daughter wasn't a fragile little girl anymore. She was a strong woman, and she had found someone who loved her truly. As we stepped back inside, the mood was lighter. Emily caught my eye and gave me a soft smile. I returned it, proud beyond words. She was going to be just fine. We all were. That night, lying beside Susan in bed, I finally let myself relax. The farm was quiet. A cool breeze floated through the open window. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. My family was whole again, and I was grateful. The weeks that followed felt almost dreamlike. Each day was filled with warmth, love, and the steady rhythm of a life falling gently back into place. Emily continued to recover, gaining strength, and with Joshua by her side, even the challenges ahead didn't seem so daunting. She took on more work around the farm. The chores, once a strain, became joyful again. Every morning she woke up with purpose. The doctors said she was progressing well, and we could see it in her every step, every smile. But the biggest change wasn't just physical. Her heart had healed too. Her love for Joshua had deepened, becoming something profound and undeniable. What began with a simple act of kindness had grown into a love that neither of them had expected, but both had embraced fully. One sunny afternoon, as Emily and Joshua worked together in the fields, planting seeds for the coming season, Emily paused to take in the view. The land stretched wide before them, the sun warming the earth, the wind carrying the scent of fresh soil. "This feels good," she said, breaking their quiet. Joshua glanced up, brushing sweat from his brow. "It does," he agreed, smiling. "It feels like everything's finally coming together." "I never thought I'd be here again," she admitted. "There were times I thought I'd never see these fields again. But now it really feels like home." Joshua stepped closer, meeting her gaze. "This is home," he said gently. "And you're exactly where you're meant to be." Emily smiled and took his hand. They stood together in the silence, the breeze rustling the trees. In that stillness, she felt the weight of the past few months dissolve, leaving behind peace, gratitude, and hope. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, her voice thoughtful, "about how much has changed, about how far we've come." Joshua gave her hand a squeeze. "We've come a long way, and I wouldn't change a thing." Emily nodded. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you, Joshua. You saved my life more than once." He shook his head gently, brushing his thumb across her hand. You saved yourself. I just gave you the chance to fight. She smiled, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. I don't know how I could ever repay you. You don't need to, Joshua said, his voice firm but kind. You and your family gave me everything when I had nothing. Everything now, it's just life coming full circle. Emily leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. She thought of her father, the man who had once given a hungry boy $25 and a place at the table. That act of kindness had changed everything. That evening, as the sun set and the family gathered around the dinner table, laughter filled the room. Susan and I sat at one end, watching our daughter laugh beside the man who had become such a vital part of our lives. The joy in the room was unmistakable. I looked around at my family, whole, happy, strong, and I felt a pride deeper than I could express. The struggles we had endured had only brought us closer. And Joshua? He wasn't just a guest anymore. He was family. As the plates were cleared, I cleared my throat, drawing everyone's attention. There's something I want to say, I began. My voice cracked a little, but I didn't care. We've all been through a lot lately, and I know I don't say it enough, but I'm proud of this family. I'm proud of all of us. Susan reached for my hand beneath the table, and Emily gave me a smile that said more than words ever could. I turned my gaze to Joshua. Joshua, you've been more than a friend to us. You've become part of this family, and I want you to know you'll always have a place here. Always. We're grateful beyond words. Joshua nodded, his voice quiet but steady. Thank you, Mr. John. This place, this family, it's more of a home than I ever had. I'm honored to be part of it. A peaceful hush settled over us after that, like a quiet blessing in the air. Later, as the stars lit up the sky, Emily stood outside, gazing upward. Joshua joined her, his hand slipping into hers. You know, she said softly, I think we're going to be okay. He smiled, eyes reflecting the starlight. Yeah, I think we are. And as they stood there beneath the vast, open sky, Emily felt a quiet certainty settle in her chest. The kindness her father had shown all those years ago had rippled through time, changing their lives in ways none of them could have imagined. Now, with Joshua beside her, Emily was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had found something real, and it would last.